if you look at my household, I have more than 60 connected devices in my home network. People are doing very intricate things in their home network, and as this network topology is getting layered, it's also becoming more challenging.
A lot of us consumers, we're used to devices such as gaming consoles, TVs, things like that, with a user interface. So you can reboot them themselves. There's a certain amount of self-management that you can do to actually make that work.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another Counterpoint conversation. I'm joined today by Hande and Colin from Motive, and we're here to discuss broadband CPE and especially kind of software that's going on in this market. It's a very interesting time. So, home networks have changed significantly in the past few years. It used to be quite a simple environment, just you needed a broadband connection and a router, but now it's much more complex. You've got numerous connected devices in the home, really big usage demands with mesh Wi-Fi systems, smart home products all through the home, streaming services, gaming applications, all these type of next generation applications that are really driving broadband usage in the home. And for consumers, the expectation, it's still the same. They just need everything to work. The service needs to be reliable, seamless, and easy to use. And service providers, they need to meet this challenge. So delivering this experience is becoming more challenging, especially as the numbers of connected devices increase and the usage becomes more complex. Service providers now need to manage a growing number of devices. They need to collect and interpret much more data than before, and they've got to kind of support both legacy and next generation technologies. So that adds another layer of kind of complexity, and issues need to be resolved quickly and ideally before the customer is even aware that there is an issue. That's what we'd want. So in this conversation, I'm joined by Motive to discuss how some of their home device management systems are evolving, why it's becoming so important for service providers, and how Motive is helping operators to simplify the connected home experience, improve service quality and operational efficiency. So I'll hand it over to Colin and Hande to introduce themselves and Motive.
My name is Hande Erdem. I'm a product director here at Motive. I manage home device management products. Motive has been around for quite some time. It was founded in 1997 in the United States, and later it was acquired by Alcatel-Lucent, which was acquired by Nokia, and eventually it was spun out of Nokia 2 years ago and again a standalone company. So we have been involved in this domain for a very long time. We are very experienced in device management, in service management, and we have also a large number of customers around the world that we are looking after.
Yeah, so my name's Colin Grealish. I'm the product manager for the Motive Intelligence function, which is basically a big data analytics and machine learning type of solution that works across our whole portfolio, not just the home device management, but also the mobile and the IoT products. And we're sort of using that technology, and we'll talk about that a little bit today, about how we can essentially optimize the usage of these platforms and these networks and basically make a better experience for our customers, the consumers, and also the actual deploying ISPs in terms of how they use those platforms.
Thanks for the introduction, guys. So, as I mentioned, home networks have changed significantly, right, in the past few years. I think especially post-COVID and during COVID, there's a whole lot more of applications and complexity. What do you guys think has made the home network so much more complex and difficult to manage? Is it just the case of the number of devices? Is it the actual usage, or is it a combination of everything?
So one thing is the device count has exploded. Like you said, average household has about 20 connected devices now. And that's for average household. If you look at my household, I have more than 60 connected devices in my home network. And I'm not even trying. So this just happens naturally, You buy something and suddenly something else pops up in your home network. So that's one thing. And the second thing that adds to complexity is that the topology is not simple anymore. You don't have a gateway where just you connect your devices to that gateway. You have gateway, you might have access points behind that gateway. You might have a mesh network behind there. You have extenders, People are doing very intricate things in their home network, and as this network topology is getting layered, it's also becoming more challenging. When you want to do a firmware upgrade, you need to think about in which order you're going to do it, because you don't want to affect the devices. And like I said, there are all these different types of devices, which makes the topology different and layered, but it also makes the heterogeneity is contributing to the complexity as well. There are different chipsets, different device makers, and our providers are also offering this, different types of devices that they have to manage, sometimes in a different way. So it is also a challenge.
I was just going to really agree with very much what you're saying. I think a lot of the problems are the variety of the devices and the expectations on those devices. So obviously, a lot of us consumers, we're used to devices such as gaming consoles, TVs, things like that, with a user interface. So you can see, you can reboot them themselves. There's a certain amount of self-management that you can do to actually make that work. But there are also a lot of other devices that don't have UIs. There's sort of doorbells and things like that. A lot of IoT devices, they have very, very different characteristics in terms of the type of demands that they have on the network. And a good example is availability. If your gaming machine is playing up, well, you switch it off, you don't play it, you go and watch something else or something like that. But with your doorbell or your video camera, you really do need to have it available all the time. And that level of availability and reliability is really, really important. It depends really on the household and the location, but that is something that is different. So there's quite a diversity in the types of connectivity of devices and they use. There's also there's also a lot of congestion out there. There's lots of different competing neighbors and neighborhoods with lots and lots of access points, all struggling to get hold of the frequencies that are available and the challenges available. And that creates problems of physical interference. And a lot of that obviously isn't obvious to the consumer. They're just seeing, they talk to the ISP, they have their devices, they're not really taking into consideration anybody else around them. And that's not something we talk about much, but that has an influence too.
One thing you mentioned is the types of devices and the complexity. You've got your games consoles, but then, as you said, the IoT devices that must always be connected. I think historically service providers were more focused on just delivering a broadband connection to the home. But today, what we're seeing at Counterpoint is many operators now need to, or they want to, maintain control within the home and kind of ensure the customer gets good service to the end device rather than just to the home. Why is it no longer enough for service providers to just manage the broadband connection? Why do they need to manage the kind of connection to the end device?
Average customer, again, they don't distinguish between your internet and Wi-Fi, right? They don't distinguish between wide area network or broadband network versus Wi-Fi. When their Netflix is buffering, when something is having a glitch, they will call the service provider. But most of the quality issues are originating inside the home, in fact. So it can be poor placement of the extenders or the router. Like Colin explained, right? There could be interference, there could be noise caused by the neighboring networks. But all these things are, in fact, affecting the churn for the service provider, because if my home experience is not good enough, I will look for other providers. So that's why I think it's in service providers' interest to look at it as a whole and not just say, okay, I'm only responsible for the broadband part, and whatever you do at your home is your problem. This doesn't seem to work anymore.
One thing I think it may be a highlight is that the home network is actually critical to the lifestyle of a lot of people. Actual daily life. It's not just before, you had like a connect, used to, I don't know, have a video on demand or something here. A lot of devices now only will work on your home network, such as TVs and stuff like that. People just don't use TVs for using terrestrial or satellite. So that criticality of usage has become to a state where people are desperate. And I think that's another driver. The actual visibility there is bringing in the ISP, and there's obviously costs associated with dealing at that level of urgency.
Obviously, yeah, as you mentioned again, that adds another layer of complexity, right? Service providers, they're not used to kind of managing the home network. They're more used to managing the broadband access, and then, as Hande said, leaving the rest to the customer, that's not good enough anymore. So I guess how does Motive's home device manager simplify this new complexity for service providers? Because it's something new for a lot of them.
Okay, our home device manager is basically allowing service providers to manage CPEs, and that can be when we talk about CPEs, it's customer premises equipment. It can be your gateway, but it can also be your extender. It can even be your IoT device that's behind there. So it allows you to manage all these devices right from a single platform. Regardless of what type of protocol they talk, be it TR69, 369, USB, or maybe even some legacy protocol, we are able to manage it. And HDM or Home Device Manager allows operators to see all the network topology. It allows them to provision new services, configure new services, do the real-time data collection. So in case there are issues in the home network, it gives the means or tools to the customer care center to do troubleshooting and run diagnostics. And a lot of device management, when you think of device management, what a service provider does day to day when they're using this kind of a platform is comes down to bulk operations. And when we talk about bulk operations, again, it is like firmware upgrades. It is critical that all these devices are up to date with their firmwares, because there are always security vulnerabilities that needs to be patched. So this is something that operators do all the time, and HDM is particularly good at this, to allow them to execute all these millions of actions or transactions in a huge database.
Well, just on the intelligence side, and we might talk about this a little bit later, but there is a new technologies that are coming out on the device management side in terms of protocols that are generating huge amounts of data, and we can collect all sorts of information. What devices are connected, what their particular bandwidth is at certain intervals, the temperature profile of the device, how it varies over time. There are lots of key indicators that we can collect: packet loss, basically on the access and on the network side, LAN versus wireless LAN. Huge amount of data, and obviously, managing that data and making sense of it is really what we're doing here with Motive, distilling it down to easy to understand and actionable insights, so we can score the health of a particular device or a particular connection. And obviously, if there's something that you can do to fix that in real time, that's something that we do as well. If it's automatically changing a channel or resetting a device or something like that. So if the more invisibly you can do things, then really the better it is for the actual consumer. We don't really want them we don't want to congratulate ourselves on them finding an issue and then finding it resolved. We want them to actually not find it in the first place. So that's and the amount of data that you can get from these particular devices really does help that. Nevertheless, if you can't solve it, having an easy score or providing a recommendation or an action that can help quickly is also something that we want, because we see support is a differentiator, and we see that with operators, particularly some of those long-standing operators that are really trusted, being able to provide them with tools to really build on that trust is something that we think is really valuable.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And I think one of the biggest pain points we're seeing for the operators is identifying where the problem actually sits. And it sounds like your manager kind of helps them do that and understand exactly where the issue is and then resolve it efficiently, rather than sending an engineer out and then adding costs in that sense. So I think that makes a lot of sense. I think we can move on to kind of some of the TR369 and TR69 as well for capabilities that were kind of mentioned. So I think, what new capabilities does TR369 open up for operators when it comes to kind of managing these more dynamic and complex home environments?
So TR369 is, it is the much needed upgrade to TR69. TR69 has been around for, I don't know, more than 20 years maybe. It allowed us to remotely manage these devices for a very long time. It did it well, but it had its shortcomings. It is a quite verbose protocol, meaning that when you want to do an operation, there's a lot of back and forth that you need to, talk to the device, negotiate with the device. And when you want to collect data, you want to save the bandwidth, not overwhelm all the bandwidth with all the data that you want to collect, because the operators, they want to collect sometimes thousands of parameters that a device has inside it. So TR69 didn't make it very easy. With USB, these things are much more efficient. It is a much more efficient. It allows us to have much more efficient way of communicating. That's one thing. More efficient way of collecting data. It also has features that TR69 didn't allow at all. For example, when we talk about the older protocol, you could only have one device manager. So one device manager um, was only, the only thing that was allowed is to have a single device manager. Whereas in USB, you can have multiple managers to manage different aspects of the device. You could have a manager to do firmware upgrades. You could have another one to do optimization, maybe for Wi-Fi. You could have another one just responsible for data collection. So this is totally new in USB. Now, also it's more secure, so there are better but there's better security mechanisms in USB. That's another thing. um, but even though both TR69 and USB, they share the same data model, USB devices are usually more capable, meaning because they are also newer, they allow us to do more diagnostics, different types of diagnostics on the device. It also allows us to get more richer telemetry data from the device. So especially when we talk about like mesh networks, etc., we are able to see the topology in a more detailed way with USB.
Makes sense. And then just to add to that, I mean, with USB, you've got all these new capabilities, but a lot of operators, of course, they have a big legacy installed base of TR69 devices. How are you kind of managing those mixed environments where they might have a lot of TR69 devices in the field that they can't instantly upgrade, right? It's going to be a process. So how are you supporting both the standards, and why is that important?
So that is true. There is no operator that says, "Oh, I only have USB devices." That would be quite rare. The operators, they have a huge legacy installed base with TR69 that they are managing. Um, our platform can manage both protocols at the same time, and there are also some devices that support both TR69 and USB at the same time. So we call them dual stack devices. So you have TR69 only device, USB only device, and dual stack devices. So three different types of devices eventually that are mixed in the whole installed base of the operator. So we are able to manage it from a single platform because our protocol stack is abstracted. Basically, it doesn't matter whether it's USB or TR69. We can support it, and we also work with operators to help them, transition from TR69 to USB. A device that is TR69 today can get a firmware upgrade and be a dual stack device tomorrow, and then again get a firmware upgrade and be, pure USB device the next day. So it is something that we deal every day. Yeah.
Got it. And then I guess how does this migration path look then? So, some service providers, they might be a bit more rapid, but are you expecting a gradual migration path with like a continued period of coexistence with the two standards, or are you expecting the kind of benefits from USB devices to really make the difference and encourage service providers to upgrade their installed base, right?
Right. The transition is definitely gradual. The operators are pretty cautious when it comes to these kind of major changes. Um, they want to introduce USB slowly. There are some operators that says, okay, only for the new devices that I add to my fleet, I will be using USB. There are some operators which I explained, they do a firmware upgrade on the device, and then the same device can be USB. But it is still in a gradual transition. There is no big bang of, okay, from now on I'm only USB. That really is not something that we have seen so far.
So as you mentioned, yeah, Motive is helping support kind of operators in mixed environments. Some operators have mesh devices, Wi-Fi 7 CPE, some have older still Wi-Fi 5 CPE, right? So you need to kind of be able to support across the board, and that's something you've explained that you're doing. But I think the next step is then how are you actually turning this data into actionable insights? As Colin mentioned earlier, it's important to kind of get this data into a simple, easy to understand insight that the operator can then act upon. So how are you doing that, and why is it important to do that? So maybe Colin.
We have a range of technologies to do that, but essentially we're taking the data from the various devices, we're harmonizing it if there are differences in different types of data. Then we're running it through a thing we call a rules engine, so you can build up a set of rules that are associated with the type of data that you have with that. And included within that, there is machine learning and artificial intelligence about collecting and understanding and working out if there are patterns associated with that, things that maybe deviate from the normal behavior that you get. But then essentially you're running it through those rules, and then you're creating an insight. You're storing the data. At that point, you can store the data, you can visualize the data. We have a drag and drop solution that you can do. You can create dashboards and things like that to make it very, very easy for the actual uh, customer care staff to see that, and also to be able to change. Because as we go through, you know, the life cycle of these devices, there are new features, new functions, different changes of specification, and the ability to basically change those insights as you go forward is quite important. And then also within that, you can also store. You can store like hot storage or cold storage. Basically, hot storage is there; it's cached, it's whatever. It can be used. Cold storage is more for backup, more for reporting. Maybe you need to have a business analyst report, maybe every 3 months, top 10, devices, top 10 failing devices, or what have you. Other insights are more triggering external systems, customer care, contact centers, things like that, as well as actually invoking device management. Device management actions can also be undertaken automatically and agentically, depending on the insight that you are discovering. And the channel change is the most simple a case of that, but you can automatically restart things and do that and reprovision things if they're needed. We can also do things like in firmware. Basically, if you see a firmware change of behavior, or not just firmware, any event. So if there is a deviation from the way that a normal device is performing, and then you have an event such as a firmware upgrade, you can notice that, and you can notice that individually on a device, also across your device spectrum. You can see the differences. And a classic simple example, if a router is overheating or is getting a series of exception errors or something like that is basically causing the broadband router to stutter and what have you. But essentially, in a nutshell, that's really the sort of process we have, a sort of big data solution to collect, manage, and learn from the data as it's coming off the platform, and then trigger things automatically to repair or notify, or basically keep a record or report.
I guess kind of looking ahead then how this might evolve. Yeah, the connected home is only becoming more complex, right? As we get AI automation, more IoT devices in the home, Wi-Fi 8 as that comes in, and new digital services, so kind of 8K streaming and like cloud gaming and those type of things. All of these are going to need smarter management. So what does the future of kind of home device management look like, especially as some of these new use cases and services come into play? Yeah, how do you see that evolving?
Yeah. I think we know that there are obviously a never-ending increase in terms of technology, which will make these things more complicated. So multi-link operations, I think, is quite common. So basically, a device will be able to attach to all the frequencies and all the types of technology at once, and obviously that is making the debugging and troubleshooting of these issues even more difficult or challenging. But obviously, that's what we do. It's an evolution. Um, Predictive channel hopping, that's something that I think that people have talked about. Basically, if we know that at certain times of day that there are congestion issues that are occurring on certain frequencies, then it maybe makes sense to actively swap those channels and frequencies automatically. I think natural language applications will come in, in almost everything we do. But I think home device management will be part of that. So basically, you have the ability to connect into apps. Block my child, between this particular time and date. Um, you know, been able to actually manage the devices without UIs and things like that in a much more easy to use and understand way, a bit more like talking to Alexa. So if you were talking to a person. I think obviously we come from a telecoms background. We were all originally with Nokia, and we see that that something they come up with is this actually moving from speeds to SLAs. So basically, you're looking at what the service level agreement that you're providing to a particular customer. And in the 5G world, they talk about slicing. So you have a slice at a certain bandwidth, a certain latency, a certain availability. So bringing that concept to the ISP at home is going to make, I think will become more popular. And that's really something I think maybe that people can understand. I think it's a lot about how that is marketed in the right sort of language that consumers can understand. So you have this, but you don't have that. I think just talking about kilobits and availability measures is something that, that will need to evolve. And self-organizing home networks. This is another sort of core network concept, but basically, as the networks get very, very complicated, lots and lots of devices. We talked about, Andy talked about a 60 devices, but I mean, it could be your average home has hundreds of devices, and how to organize the network in an optimal way by itself using various different technologies and allocating resources through the various components in that particular device, I think is something that will need to be looked at.
Maybe I can add one thing. The AI-driven autonomous networks is being discussed heavily in the industry today. Everybody is doing or adding AI, right? We are adding AI in the device management layer, but there is AI in various different levels. You have, or they're talking about edge AI, having AI capability in the CP so that it can self-optimize itself. Then you have AI on the network elements, in between us, OLTs, for example, or BNGs, the elements that are in between. There is AI in your home device manager. There is AI maybe on the higher level in service management level. There's AI in OSS. So we are adding all these types of AIs in different layers. How are these all going to talk to each other? Is going to be, I think, another challenging aspect in the future. How do we make sure that when one of those AIs does something, it doesn't, destabilize something else? So this is going to be, I think, a challenge also in the future that we will need to discuss and try to find a solution or a way of coordination to, get the best out of this.
There's one thing maybe we haven't talked about is that the home gateway actually is seen very much as a cost, really very much for the ISP, but that in itself, that's a computer. You can actually put apps and things on that now. Um, there's sort of standards that have evolved not just in the broadband forum but in other bodies that allow you to sort of put containerized applications in that, such as firewalls and maybe energy management apps and things like that. And I think that may be somewhere area another where ISPs could also maybe improve the experience of the consumer by putting their sort of clever little apps on those particular routers. And obviously the use of the TR69 and TR369 of actually managing those applications is part of that. But that we see that expanding in the future as well.
Yeah, actually, I was just going to touch on that bonus question, but I was going to ask, I guess, how are you expecting the role of the CPE to evolve, right? Especially as we get into some of these edge AI use cases, and will the CPE itself be capable of some of these AI things? Of course, some simple models can run on the CPE. Are you expecting that to become more and more complex, or are you expecting cloud-based AI to still have its part, or a balance between the two? Because of course, there's security considerations and other things to take into account. So how do you see that the role of the CPE evolving?
It will be both. I mean, the CP vendors, they're already, looking to add or adding ML-based, machine learning-based AI capabilities on the CPEs. I was at Broadband Forum Summit last week, and there were talks of being able to run small language models on the CPEs. Not sure if it has the resources or capabilities today to be able to do that, but maybe in the future, who knows? When they increase the RAM and CPU, maybe it will be capable. There is definitely a place for cloud-based AI. It will be there for any complex operation. Plus, cloud-based AI has the advantage of being able to get more data from different data sources, whereas your CPE can only operate within its own domain, within its own data. So I see a place for both.
So yeah, I guess just to close, we'll bring us back to the service provider perspective. They're under a lot of pressure to improve their customer experience, reduce some of the operational costs, and then prepare for these more complex future home environments that we expect to see in the near future. What kind of key takeaways would you like to highlight for the service providers, and what's the kind of main message for them from this conversation?
So I think the answer is often it's not just about more bandwidth, really. It's about cleverer bandwidth, managing there has been a thing. Oh, you've got a problem with your bandwidth. Multiply. Maybe you need fiber, etc. We're seeing that is not always the case to solving the problem. The problem is often to do with other types of issues that are in the home network, and resolving that is really what they should focus on. There is a massive increase in data, and that is providing a huge opportunity to improve the home and the broadband experience. And really, we think operators should embrace that. The router we see that's not a liability. We said that before. That's very much an asset. You can put software on that. You can use that for security, self-optimization, IoT, energy management. We believe there's a real case there for that. And I think Hande said this before. Linking together all these capabilities with AI, using hybrid models of AI, maybe on the device and on the cloud, can lead to all sorts of advancements and optimizations in terms of self-optimizing networks, and very easy to manage from a consumer perspective applications as we go forward, are basically providing an easy to use automated type of network experience.
Right. So from my side, two things. Operators need to manage the CPE well because they don't want to lose customers, right? The home experience is very important. So that's one thing, to reduce churn, not to lose their customers. The second thing is the applications that Colin mentioned, that nowadays you can run applications on the CPE, and that opens up new, sources of revenue. So operators can actually monetize on these applications. We talked about the concept of service-enabled gateway, right? You can add these new capabilities to the gateway and monetize on them. I, as a parent, would be willing to, would be willing to pay for parental controls application on my gateway. So because it's of my interest to protect my children, etc. And someone else might think another application will be better. It could be Wi-Fi optimization application. There are various applications out there. And USP, TR369. In fact, when you ask me about the advantages of TR369, I didn't think about this, but this is one of the main advantages of it, is that it also allows you to manage these software modules, what we call these little applications, in a better way compared to what we could do before. So it is an enabler in that sense.
So yeah, thank you both for your time, and it was a very interesting conversation. I think there's a lot to think about for operators, even CPE vendors, and when they want to start supporting these newer standards. I think there will be a big kind of shift in the next few years in the home network, and definitely some software and using this intelligence in the best way possible is going to be increasingly important. So it's great to talk to you both, and thank you for your time.